Hi, if you're watching this, it means that I did not scare you off on the first round, so that's good. And we'll launch right into the second page, Okay, so taking a look at this guy, what we're doing are equations, and you may have heard in the last video, I called those things that did not have an equal sign, I called those expressions. So you should write down on a page of notes, expressions, no equal signs, okay? No equal signs, and maybe put in parentheses, simplify, equations have equal signs, and those guys you're going to be solving. Okay, so make sure you write that down somewhere so you have it, so you know the difference between the two, because that becomes really important. Okay, so for number one here, we have x minus 8 equals 24. What I want to talk about for equations, and you probably, again, a lot of this is already going to be familiar. If that's the case, no sweat. Maybe I'll teach you something new or teach you a new way of looking at something. But in the meantime, we want to talk about inverse operations, aka the opposite. So the opposite of addition is subtraction. The opposite of subtraction is addition. The opposite of multiplication, division. Opposite of division, multiplication. This is really important because in order to solve equations, we want to do the opposite of what is there, okay? So right here we have a negative 8, and again, negative. I'll interchange negative and subtract and positive and add. It doesn't matter, that means the same thing. So the opposite of a negative is a positive. And what I want to do, think of equations like scales. You want them to balance, okay? So if you do it on one side of the equal sign, you have to do it on the other. What I want to do is the opposite here. And the reason why is because then these guys cancel out like that. Do you see that? And the idea behind solving equations is to get that x all by itself, okay? You want to get that variable all by itself. So I added 8 here, but I need to add 8 here. That means I have x equals 24 plus 8 is going to be 32. Okay, so 24 plus 8 is 32. Now, the good news with equations is you can always go back and check your work, and I highly advise that you do that until you really get the feel of it, okay? So the original equation was x minus 8 equals 24. So when I say check your work, what we can do is 32 minus 8 equals 24. And I put a little question mark here because I'm like, does that work? Sure enough, 32 take away 8 will give us 24. So 24 equals 24. That statement is true. You have done this correctly. Okay, so let's see about number 2. X plus 4 equals 38. All right, the opposite of adding is subtracting. So we're going to do minus 4 minus 4. This cancels out on that side. Draw your line. And you should be writing them the way I'm showing you on this board, okay? This is how you need to be writing them on your paper. Anything else is going to be messy, and I guarantee you, again, I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm going to say the number one mistake that I see is that students are too messy for their own writing, and so they're their own worst enemy. Don't be that. I would hate for you to waste your time. So we're going to bring down this x here and bring down our equal sign. 38 minus 4 is 34. Again, if we plugged it into here, 34 plus 4 gives us 38. So we've done it correctly. All right, 3. All right, before we go on, I want to just introduce you to the way that I talk about integers. Integers are positive and negative numbers, right? So -2, +2, -3, +3, all of that. I have this saying that I say in my class, 6th graders subtract, 7th graders add the opposite. Add the opposite. You're not going to subtract anymore. You're going to add the opposite. What do I mean by that? Let's say I have -10, or let's just say I have 10 minus 7. Well, we all know 10 minus 7 is going to equal 3, right? But we don't subtract anymore. We add, and then we do the opposite of whatever this is. So the opposite of +7 is going to be -7, okay? These two teams are different, and I know you play baseball, right? So think of these as baseball teams. Here's your positive team and your negative team, okay? For your answer, when the teams are different, you want to find which team is larger. Is our positive team larger or our negative team? Well, there's 10 players on the positive team and 7 on the negative, so this is larger. That means our answer is going to be positive, okay? So this team is larger by how many? 3. And when I'm asking how many, I'm asking for the difference in the teams, and difference means subtract, okay? So let's do another practice on that. If we did 10 minus -3, 10 minus -3. Again, we don't 6th graders subtract, 7th graders add the opposite. So we are going to change our subtraction sign to add, and then the opposite of -3, +3, +3. So this one will be 13, okay? So change all your subtraction signs to add, all right? So where is this relevant? Let's do -10 minus 3 equals, okay, again, 6th graders subtract, 7th graders add, and then the opposite of +3 is -3. Here's a case where they're on the same team. Do you see the negative team and the negative team? How big is that team now? That team is now 13 players big, okay? So how does this apply then for number 3? All right, we have x minus 16 equals -24. All right, so the opposite of -16 here, or subtracting 16, is to add it. Let me come over here. All right, so I'm gonna bring down my x equals. Now I have -24 and positive, and whenever we're doing this, we're adding, okay? So -24 and +16, which team is larger? Well, it looks like there's more players on our negative team. It's larger by how many? Well, it looks like there's 8 players on that team. So -8, let's go back and check that work. This is -8 minus 16 equals -24. Sure enough, 6th graders subtract, 7th graders add, and the opposite of +16 is -16. So we have -24 equals -24. Bam, we did it correctly. We did it correctly. All right, take a look at, that was 3, 4, 5, and 6 are missing, so that's cool. Let's do 7. 3x equals 39. The operation that's going on right here between these guys is multiplication. And I said in a previous video, 3 times 2, you're going to see multiplication written like this. You may see it written like this, but we're getting away from that x because you can see it's kind of confusing when we use x as a variable. You may also see it written like this. Now, when we do have a variable, we don't even put anything. Again, mathematicians are lazy. We don't write anything we don't want, or we don't want to have to write anything if we don't have to. So, if that made sense. So I don't put a dot or parentheses here. I just leave it like this, and this is indicating multiplication. Of course, we can't do that with 3 times 2, because how would we know that that's 3 times 2 and not just 32? So that's the method behind the madness there. All right, so we're multiplying. The inverse operation of multiplication, or the opposite of multiplication, is to divide. And if we do that, these guys cancel out, and we get that x by itself just like we wanted. And we do this, x equals, and if you need to do some side work, that's totally fine. 3 goes into 3 one time. That gives us 3, bring down the 9, 3 goes into 9 3 times, and then 3 times 3 is 9, so we have a remainder of 0, so it's 13. X equals 13. And sure enough, if we put this into the original problem, 3 times 13, we would get 39. 39. All right, so let's look at 8. Go ahead and try 8. Pause it and try 8 and see what you get. All right, so you should divide both sides by 9. X equals, let's do some side work. 9 goes into 11 one time without going over. That gives us 2. We bring down a 7. 9 goes into 27 3 times with no remainders, so we have 13. 13. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, now we talked about adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers. Now we need to talk about multiplying and dividing. Just like fractions, multiplying and dividing negative numbers is easier than adding and subtracting. Here's the deal. Same signs, positive. You may want to write this down just in case you don't remember. Oh, let's try this again. Same, so multiplication and division. Same sides. Ugh. Same signs. I have this illness called sunshine fever. Same signs equals positive, different signs. There we go, different signs. Negative. That's the only rule for multiplication and division of positive and negative numbers. So negative 2x equals negative 400. This is number 9, by the way. All right, we're multiplying here. So the opposite of multiply is to divide. This guy cancels out with this guy. Let's do it to the other side. What you do to one side, always got to do to the other. Those negative signs cancel out, right? Because a negative divided by a negative, that's the same signs. So it's going to be positive. So x equals, and then 400 divided by 2. Basically, we're cutting 400 in half, and when we do that, we get 200. 200. Okay, let's look at 10. X over 3. X divided by 3 is 20. All right, that line right there, that's a fraction bar. I'm sure you're familiar with that. you probably saw division written like this, like on the previous page, you saw division written like this. We're getting away from that. And now when we want to do division, we divide. We divide, of course we do. We use a fraction bar, that's what I was getting at. So this is division. The opposite or the inverse operation of division is multiplication. And here's why. If I do this 3, technically, like I said before, it can be over 1, right? Because anything can be over 1. This is now in the top, this is in the bottom, those guys cancel out, right? But what I do to one side, I must do over here. So I multiplied this side by 3, I must also multiply this side by 3. So x equals 60, x equals 60. And sure enough, if we go back and plug it in here, 60 divided by 3 is gonna give us 20. All right, so pause and try 11 on your own. Try 11 on your own. Sure enough, we need to multiply this by 4. These cancel out. Multiply this by 4. X equals 15 times 4. It's really the same as 30 times 2, right? Because 15 times 15 is, or 15 doubled is 30. And that's easier to solve because that's 60, right? So hopefully that makes sense. All right, let's look at 12. We have x divided by -5. Pause this and try that one on your own. All right, so we have -5 that I'm multiplying on the top. This cancels out with this, but what I do to one side, I must do to the other. X equals a negative times a negative is a positive, so we know the answer is going to be positive, and we get 14 times 5. That gives us 70. 70, okay? All right, so now we've got some more difficult equations here. We have 13. This is going to be 8 equals -5r. 5r. I'm going to assume that. Plus 18. Yeah, that's probably what it says. Okay, so again, we have 3 chunks here because chunks are broken up by addition and subtraction. The idea here is you want to get the chunk with the variable, that's this chunk right here, by itself, which means we need to move this guy over to the other side. And in order to do that, we do the opposite. -18, -18. We're gonna bring this down. These guys cancel out. 18 or 8 and -18. Which team is larger? Our negative team. And by how many? By 10. So our answer is -10, okay? Equals, we're gonna bring all this other garbage down. -5r. Now we have that chunk by itself. So now we can do, we can get that r by itself, right? You gotta first get the chunk by itself and then you gotta separate the r or the variable out. So here we're multiplying, and the opposite of multiply is to divide. When we do that, these guys cancel out, but what I do to one side, I must do to the other. Negative divided by negative is gonna be a positive. So r equals, because I can switch that around a little bit, 10 divided by 5, which is 2. 10 divided by 5 is 2. All right, so then we have 14 is 3x plus 14 equals -1. Again, we have 3 chunks here, right? We got this chunk, that chunk, and that chunk. Chunks are broken up by addition, subtraction, and that equal sign. We want to get the chunk with the variable by itself. That's this chunk right here. So we're going to subtract 14 from both sides, because that's the opposite of positive 14. We get 3x equals -1 and -14. These guys are on the same team now, and that team is 15 big. Now to get that x by itself, we're going to do the opposite, which is divide and divide. X equals a negative divided by a positive. Those are different signs, so your answer is going to be negative. And 15 divided by 3 is 5. 15 divided by 3. All right, one more. Number 16. These numbers are all out of order. That's hilarious. Number 16. -3x plus 1 equals -5. All right, one more. We want to get, so we have 3 chunks again. We want to get this chunk all by itself, so we need to move this chunk over. So we're going to -1, -1. That cancels out here. We're going to draw our line, bring down -3x equals -5 and -1. Those guys are on the same team, the negative team, and it is now 6 players big. Okay? Divide both sides by -3. X equals a negative divided by a negative. Those are the same signs, so our answer is going to be positive. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Awesome. All right, there's another part of this page, but I'm going to do that in a different video because it's talking about fractions, decimals, and percents and all that good stuff, and I have a lot to say about that. I have a lot to say about a lot of things, but in the meantime, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, great work, and I will see you, or I'll see you. I'll revisit you with another video. Thanks so much.